What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hands-On channel. Let's play a little game, shall we? Thermonuclear war. I don't know if you guys will get that reference or not, but we're at high alert, guys. Our mainstream media is failing us on every level. So much so that I'm worried that they won't even report on it when the mushroom clouds are forming over our cities, right? And wiping out our populations. I mean, this is life and death we're talking about here, and I'm not trying to be sensational or overly sensational or hyperbolic, as people like to say. This is from the headlines that I've been reading for the past week or so. We have never been closer in all of my lifetime. I'm 47 years old. In all of my lifetime, we have never been closer to nuclear war than we are right now. So, before we get into all these headlines, I think it'd be very, very valuable to you as a prepper to go out and for your family, get the book. There's a booklet that was put out, I believe, in the late 70s called Nuclear Warfare Survival or something like that. If I can think of it, I'll try to put a link at the end of the video or down in the description or something. If you can't afford to buy the thing, I think it's like 20 bucks. If you can't afford to buy the hard copy, you can go online and don't just store it on your computer, because those may not work. Print it out. You know, if you have a printer or access to a printer, print it out, keep it in a folder somewhere, because I'm afraid we're going to need this. We're going to need these survival skills that are rarely talked about. You know, I think back to like a few months ago when basically they told the residents of New York City that, hey, you should be prepared for nuclear warfare. And they kind of gave them instructions on what to do, go inside, wait for help. Bullshit. If you see mushroom clouds, you better run. You better run as fast and hard as you can to get yourself and your family to safety. And you need to know about which way the wind's blowing and stuff like that. But anyway, this video is not about nuclear survival skills. It's about the reason you should be looking into this. So let's get into these headlines. Putin puts a 16,000 mile per hour doomsday nuke dubbed Satan II that can sink the UK in one strike on combat duty for the first time ever. I mean, I think that's a pretty big, bold headline. The mainstream media ought to be on repeat talking about this and what we can do to avoid nuclear warfare with Russia. Okay? You know, you may look at Russia and think, oh, well, they're backwards. Or one of the arguments that I've heard from somebody I have a lot of respect for, they told me that, oh, don't worry, Russia's nukes are all, you know, that takes a lot of manpower and a lot of maintenance to maintain these nukes, and they haven't maintained them, so don't worry, none of their nukes will probably work. And I mentioned to him, I'm like, yeah, but it only takes one, especially one of these Satan IIs that has something like, I can't remember if it's 100 warheads on it or what, but it's basically an ICBM, but it has multiple warheads on it. And many of them are dummies, so that, the defending nation will try to shoot those down, and many of them are dummies, so they'll spend time targeting the dummies rather than the real ones, and the real ones will be allowed to go down and hit. And so, I mean, I think that's a bold headline. They can sink the UK in one strike. That's the UK. What could they do to, I don't know, let's say Washington, D.C., or, Dallas, Texas, or San Francisco, or any of these big major metropolis areas? Could you imagine if a nuke, one of these Satan IIs, actually went off in New York City? How many people would die instantly, and how many others would go on for, weeks or months in agony because they're suffering from radiation poisoning? I mean, these are things that don't get talked about nearly enough, in my opinion. Back when I grew up during the 80s and stuff, we used to have they would do drills in school for what if Russia, we were in the Cold War, so it was constantly a threat that we were going to get nuked, right? And I grew up near a major Air Force base, so because of that, our teachers were constantly pounding into our heads, duck and cover, get under the desk, and kiss your ass goodbye, as if that was going to save anybody. But at least they made us aware of it, and I would argue that in a way, they scared all of us about nukes, because we've seen the videos, we've seen the damage and what can be done. And obviously they've only really been used in warfare twice, I guess you could say, by us during World War II. And so, and those were small in comparison. Those are like a pinprick. When you look at the chart, those, little boy, big boy, whatever it was called, the ones we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those were like a pinprick compared to this technology that they're talking about here. The Satan II missile is massive, man. And they also have in their arsenal the Tsar Bomba, which is the single biggest single nuclear warhead that's ever been detonated. I mean, do we really want to poke the bear like we are, like Biden is doing by using NATO, using Ukraine as a NATO proxy war? I mean, so I think not. I think we should be treading very lightly, and we should be trying to do things to be friendly with Russia, not be getting in their way and be an obstacle to them, because every time we do, it basically makes them, push back even harder. And Putin has said that if we cross certain lines, he will have no choice but to use nukes. So the threats are out there, guys. So let's get in and continue on with these headlines here. Russia deploys intercontinental ballistic missile for combat duty. That's this one we were just talking about, the Satan II. And that was named by us. It wasn't named the Satan II by the Russians, I don't believe. That was what we call it, because it's scary as Satan coming on the face of the earth. So World War III fears explode as China warns U.S. of imminent storm of lethal consequences over Taiwan. So recently Biden, I don't know, he didn't go to Taiwan, but he basically offered Taiwan some sort of, aid in the form of money, weapons. I don't know what it was exactly, but as soon as that happened, Xi Jinping got pissed off and was like, hey, this is an imminent storm of lethal consequences if you guys continue on this path. See, China, I'm sure, as you know, if you're a well-informed, hands-on channel audience member, you already know this, but China thinks that Taiwan belongs to them. And every nation that China has ever occupied should go back to them, right? It's called the One China policy. Go look it up. What's bizarre to me is every single American president has signed on to the One China policy. Even Trump, I believe, signed on to the One China policy. What would happen, I wonder, if the next president said, no, we're not signing on to your One China policy. Screw you guys. You don't get to have it just because you owned it 300 years ago or whatever. So anyway, moving on. Moscow says globalists in Washington, D.C. are trying to unleash a new deadly bioweapon in violation of international law. And so, as we all know, if you've been paying attention, they busted something like 14 or 17 bioweapons laboratories over in Ukraine. And these are just the ones we know about, right? And so early on in the war, Russia was targeting these places because obviously that is a direct threat to them. It's close enough in proximity to Moscow that, we could be cooking this stuff up, not we, me and you, but we, the United States, could be cooking this stuff up that could be genetically targeted towards the Russian population. So obviously Moscow knows about this sort of stuff. This sort of technology is out there and they don't want that. So arguably, that's one of the main reasons they went ahead and invaded Ukraine to begin with, was because they were wanting to get rid of these bioweapons labs. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what Moscow is saying. So take it with a grain of salt. Maybe it's Russian disinformation just to, make us look a different direction. It's misdirection or whatever, right? I don't know for sure, but when you see these things, misinformation coming out and disinformation coming out of both sides of a battle, you have to kind of find the middle ground and figure out what the truth really is. So at least that's what I try to do. Next headline, U.S. facing worsening ammo shortages while trying to keep up with Ukraine's demands. So as we're getting closer and closer to the end, my friends, we're running out of ammo. And I would argue Biden is doing this intentionally. He wants us to be out of ammo when the bullets start flying. He wants us to not have petroleum reserves so that we can run the war machine and actually possibly win the war. In my opinion, the United States is scheduled to lose, or it's planned that we will lose World War III. And why? Because the globalists can't implement their New World Order unless the United States either completely submits or no longer exists. And I think that's what they're going for. They want to wipe us off the map. Why? Because we've had too much for too long, according to the UN. It's time for us to share the wealth with the rest of the world. And what they really mean by that is bringing the United States down to a third world country status. They don't like us being a superpower. Next headline here, as if it's not bad enough. Kim Jong-un and Putin are planning to meet in Russia to discuss weapons. So, I mean, that's kind of a big deal. We're running low on ammo. One other thing I wanted to mention. I didn't put it down here on my headlines, but the U.S. military is having a hell of a time getting recruits to come in and sign up for Joe Biden's war. And part of the problem is there's so many obese people, a bunch of fatties, trying to enlist that the U.S. military is having to raise their body mass index level, BMI, so that they can get these people that are too fat right now currently under the situation. So, I mean, this ain't looking good, guys. And we all know kind of the attitudes that a lot of these younger generations have. So these are the people that they're going to be putting on the front lines against Russia, if it comes to that. I've talked and done stories before in the past about how we have countless people coming up, foreign actors, whether they're Chinese or Russian or, whatever, from Afghanistan or whatever. These people that are coming up through the southern border unchecked. We have no idea where they are. We have no idea if they're activating or if they're sitting on sleeper cells right now, just waiting for the word from Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or Osama bin Laden Part 2, whatever, to activate. And I'm worried that's going to happen, guys. Our border is so porous, they could be sneaking who knows what up through there, including small nukes, backpack nukes, tactical nukes. I don't know if you're old enough or if you remember this or not, but when the Soviet Union broke up, they lost a whole bunch of these suitcase nukes. They just disappeared. And I would argue they're still out there. They're in waiting. They might be here already for all we know. So maybe it doesn't take a Tsar Bomba or a Satan II missile. Maybe all it takes is a suitcase nuke placed at the right place, in New York City or Washington, D.C. or whatever, on and on. There's so many ripe targets for the picking that, it would be hard for them to choose just one target. So who's to say it will be one? What if it's, 5 suitcase nukes all around the country that go off at once? Could you imagine the chaos that would ensue after 5 nukes went off in 5 major cities in the United States of America? You talk about The Road, the movie The Road, or the Book of Eli. That's what comes to my mind whenever I think about that sort of stuff. Because if that happens, the United States will have no choice but to retaliate. At least a normal administration would have no choice but to retaliate. Again, Biden is on the side of the New World Order, so he wants us to lose this war, so maybe he wouldn't retaliate. It's hard to tell what, this old fuddy-duddy would do from one day to the next, but I guarantee he's going to be wearing a mask. I guarantee he's going to be pushing that stuff down your throat again. So, moving on. Ukraine wants to break through the Russian defenses, and of course, that's only the first step. They want to defeat Russia, obviously, but flooding Ukrainian troops into the gap could prove even harder. So what they've been trying to do, and I don't know if I'll be able to do this or not, but I saw a picture the other day. This guy was showing all the land that Ukraine has tried to basically take back from Russia, and it ain't good, man. It's very little. And to my understanding, they have lost something like 50 to 75,000 troops trying to do this, what do they call it, counterinsurgents or something like that. To try to fight back against Russia's push into their country. They're trying to, push back against them, but they're losing. Even with all the fancy NATO, top of the line, military equipment, they're still losing. They're getting their asses kicked. And apparently, from my understanding, there's a huge pile of Ukrainian bodies because of this, because of NATO, because of Biden pushing for this so hard. So, Who's responsible for this? Well, the people that are in charge are responsible. Joe Biden, the leaders of Europe, the leaders of the NATO countries and stuff like that. And behind the scenes are people like Klaus Schwab's with the WEF and people at the UN, stuff like that. So again, all this stuff plays into their hands. No matter what happens, if they are allowed to destroy the United States of America, that's going to make it a much easier prospect for them to implement the New World Order, the Great Reset, all these things they talk about. will be a lot easier once the United States is out of the way. So, last headline here, and it may be the most important one. Russia state TV threatens nuclear strike on the United States. They're basically drawing lines in the sand, and they're saying, if you do this, we're going to do that. We're going to nuke your ass. And they're saying this openly on Russian state TV. Now, again, could that just be hype? Yes, it could be. Could it just be, theater to try to make us worry about, the possibility of nukes and all this stuff? Yes, it could be. But it could also be serious. I mean, all it takes, if Putin is 1/4 as crazy as the mainstream media has painted him to be, why hasn't he used nukes already? That's my question. Maybe he's not as crazy as they're saying. Maybe we're not getting the story of the truth from our perspective, from our side. And I think that's what's happening. Guys, you better prepare now. If all these headlines don't light a fire underneath your ass to get you out prepping, and I mean prepping for surviving nuclear war. I know a lot of people are going to come into the comments and say, well, if it goes to that level, I don't want to survive anyway. Well, let me ask you this. What if you don't get hit with a direct hit and you end up dying because you didn't have the proper NBC, nuclear, biological, chemical gas masks and things like that could save you and save your life? And what are those pills, iodine or iodide or something like that you can have on hand? I mean, we're talking about things that aren't unattainable. I mean, you can go out and get NBC masks and things like that, and these iodide pills, just in case. And if you never use them, hey, that's great. But you'll have them on hand in case mushroom clouds start forming around your local cities and stuff. So the best advice I have for you is prepare now. Get that book I was talking about, Nuclear War Survival Skills, I believe is what it's called, and learn it, know it, once nukes start falling and stuff, all your surface water is contaminated. All your animals, your squirrels and different things like that, deer and things that made it through the blast, if they have radiation poisoning and you consume that meat, now you have radiation poisoning. What's your plan to survive thermonuclear warfare, full scale? I mean, what if it goes full scale? Do you have enough data with old school, old-fashioned maps and things like that to where you'd be able to drive? Do you know which way the wind blows predominantly in your area during different seasons? That way you'll be able to avoid the cloud of radiation that's going to be flowing up through the air and stuff. It wouldn't do you any good if you run into the cloud, the path of the cloud, right? So you have to know which way to go depending on which way the wind's blowing. These are all things that are going to be specific to your area that you should be learning about and stocking up on all the things you're going to need right now, because I hate to say it, but it feels like we're getting closer and closer to the end. And I don't know how many more videos I'm even going to be able to put out. I mean, again, if they start nuking people, even if it's in Europe, even if they don't hit the United States, if they hit Europe, I would argue that would give Biden the ability to declare martial law, and all sorts of bad stuff would come about because of that. I mean, if you don't believe me, look at what happened during Hurricane Katrina, where they went in, they sent local police in to round up people's firearms because it was a type of martial law that they were implementing there. And I can't believe that. When I think back on that sort of stuff, I'm like, yeah, would that happen again? Yeah. If nukes start falling, even in Europe or someplace like that, they're going to declare martial law. At least that's my opinion. And I would argue that Biden would use this to declare World War III and postpone the 2024 elections. I think that's highly, highly likely, possible, and probably the plan they're pushing for right now, because we all know Biden doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell if it's a fair contest against Trump. And unless they can make something stick to Trump and disqualify him from running, which I don't think they can, then Biden's going to have to run against him. And most likely he's going to lose unless he declares the War Powers Act and postpones the election. So things ain't looking good, guys. I hope you're prepping up while you can, because time is running out. The hourglass has been tipped over. 2024 We may not make it to 2024, and if we do, I think there's a very, very high likelihood that Biden will postpone the elections and hold power as long as he's allowed to, because it's the only way he can stay in power. And we all know that's what all these people at the end of the day that are in the political elite class, that's all they care about, is keeping power. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. I stand for liberty to the bitter end. I hope you do too.